You expect me to serve coffee and appetizers to 20 people at your father-in-law's funeral? Alone? My voice echoed through the quiet funeral home kitchen, trembling with disbelief and rage. I could feel the blood rushing to my face as I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Amanda, my daughter, blinked in shock. I had never raised my voice like that in front of others. But this time, I had had enough. I wiped my hands on a towel, turned to her, and said slowly, "I am not a maid. I'm your mother, and I will not be treated like help at a funeral." She paled instantly, realizing the crowd outside was hearing every word. But she had no idea what was coming next. My name is Darlene Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, retired from a 40-year career as a public school librarian in Albany, New York. I've lived in the same house for over 3 decades, the one I shared with my husband until he passed 10 years ago. Since then, my world has revolved around my daughter Amanda, and unfortunately, her increasingly entitled husband, Travis Harper. When Amanda married Travis, I welcomed him like a son. He was Stanley Harper's only child, and Stanley was a well-known businessman in our city. Travis always had a chip on his shoulder, always seeking approval from his father and never quite earning it. The kitchen of Harper Funeral Home was immaculate stainless steel countertops that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, commercial coffee makers humming in the corner, and boxes of expensive catering stacked on every available surface. I'd arrived 3 hours early at Amanda's insistence. Now I understood why. "Mom, please," Amanda whispered, her eyes darting to the swinging door that led to the reception area. "Everyone's waiting. The service is starting in an hour, and nothing is ready." I took a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs but doesn't quite calm your nerves. "And whose fault is that, Amanda? You told me you needed a little help with refreshments. Not that I would be playing caterer to the entire Harper family while you and Travis sit in the front row looking solemn." Amanda's face crumpled. She was wearing an expensive black dress that I knew cost more than my monthly pension. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover about grieving with grace. Meanwhile, I was in a simple black dress I'd worn to 3 funerals already, with comfortable shoes because I'd anticipated being on my feet, but not like this. Never like this. "Mom, it's just that you're so good at these things," she pleaded. "Travis is devastated. He can barely function. His father was everything to him." I almost laughed. "Travis is devastated? The same Travis who called his father a controlling bastard at Christmas dinner? The same Travis who refused to visit Stanley in the hospital last year because they had a fight about money?" The kitchen door swung open, and there he stood, Travis Harper in his tailored black suit, his expression a carefully crafted mask of grief. His eyes were red, but not from crying. Probably from staying up all night arguing with Stanley's lawyer about the will. "Darlene," he said, his voice syrupy with fake warmth. "Everything okay in here?" "People are getting restless." I straightened my spine. At 68, I wasn't as tall as I used to be, but I still had my dignity. "No, Travis, everything is not okay. Your wife just informed me that I'm expected to cater this entire reception by myself." Travis's fake sympathy vanished. "Look, we discussed this already. You said you'd help." "Help, yes." "Be treated like hired help?" "No," Amanda stepped between us. "Mom, please, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Amanda?" I asked. "When was the time all those nights I stayed up with the twins so you could sleep? When was the time all those months I paid your mortgage when Travis's business was failing? When was the time when I gave you my retirement savings for the twins' preschool?" The room grew silent. Even the humming of the refrigerator seemed to pause. Travis's face darkened. "That's not fair. We've always been grateful." "Grateful?" I cut him off. "Grateful people don't treat their mother like a servant. Grateful people don't assume I'll drop everything to solve their problems. Grateful people say, 'Thank you' and 'I love you' instead of 'Could you just' and 'We need you to.'" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. "Mom, I never meant to." The kitchen door swung open again. This time it was a thin man in a somber suit, holding a leather portfolio. I recognized him from the few family gatherings I'd attended. Mr. Abernathy, Stanley's lawyer for over 30 years. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I couldn't help overhearing, "Mrs. Whitmore, isn't it?" I nodded, embarrassed that this stranger had witnessed our family drama. "We're about to begin the service, followed by the reading of the will," he said. "And I believe your presence will be required, Mrs. Whitmore," Travis scoffed. Why would she need to be there? She barely knew my father. Mr. Abernathy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Harper specifically requested Mrs. Whitmore's presence when the will is read. In fact, he was quite insistent about it. The room fell silent again, but this time with confusion. I had only met Stanley Harper a handful of times over the years. Our conversations had been pleasant but brief. What could he possibly want with me? Amanda touched my arm, her demeanor suddenly shifting. Mom, I'm sorry about the reception. We'll figure something out. Maybe we can ask some of the cousins to help. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Suddenly, I wasn't just the convenient help, I was someone potentially important to Stanley's will. The transformation was as transparent as it was painful. The service begins in 30 minutes, Mr. Abernathy announced. Mrs. Whitmore, shall I save you a seat in the front row? Before I could answer, Travis interrupted. She'll sit with us, of course. She's family. I almost laughed at the sudden upgrade in my status. 10 minutes ago, I was the kitchen help. Now I was family. As people began filing into the funeral home, I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by untouched catering boxes and expensive coffee beans, and made a decision that had been years in the making. Whatever was in Stanley's will, whatever reason he had for including me, I would use this moment to reclaim my dignity. To set boundaries that should have been established long ago, because when Stanley's lawyer opened that will, when that old envelope was finally unsealed, the truth about who I was to this family, and what I had done for it was going to change everything, and I was ready. The funeral service for Stanley Harper was exactly what you'd expect for a man of his stature in Albany. The funeral home's main chapel was filled with floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly pension. Local business leaders and politicians sat shoulder to shoulder with family members who had flown in from across the country. The minister spoke of Stanley's contributions to the community, his business acumen, and his generosity, though I noticed no one mentioned his skills as a father. I sat in the front row, sandwiched between Amanda and a cousin I'd never met. Travis sat on Amanda's other side, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Throughout the service, I could feel people's curious glances. The mother-in-law of the deceased's son was hardly front-row material under normal circumstances. As the minister concluded his remarks, Travis rose to deliver the eulogy. I watched him climb the 3 steps to the podium, his shoulders squared, his expression appropriately solemn. My father was a complicated man, he began. He built an empire from nothing. He demanded excellence from himself and everyone around him. Sometimes that made him difficult to love, but always impossible not to respect. I listened as Travis painted a picture of a father-son relationship that I had never witnessed. In his telling, he and Stanley had been close, bound by mutual respect and shared values. I thought of the Christmas dinner 3 years ago, when Travis had stormed out after Stanley questioned his latest business venture. I thought of the twins' birthday party last year, when Stanley had shown up with expensive gifts but left early because Travis made a snide comment about handouts. As Travis spoke, I felt Amanda's hand slip into mine. I looked at her, surprised by the gesture. Her eyes were fixed on her husband, but her fingers tightened around mine. In that moment, I wondered if she was finally seeing what I had seen for years: the performance, the pretense, the carefully constructed facade. After the service, people mingled in the reception area. Someone, likely Mr. Abernathy, had arranged for staff to handle the refreshments. I watched as young men and women in black attire circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres and glasses of wine. No one seemed to notice or care that I wasn't the one serving them. Mrs. Whitmore? A gentle voice interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Abernathy stood beside me, his leather portfolio tucked under his arm. We'll be beginning the reading of the will in 15 minutes. In the Harper Library, if you'd care to join us. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Who else will be there? Immediate family only, he replied. Mr. Travis and Mrs. Amanda Harper, of course. And yourself. But I'm not immediate family, I pointed out. Mr. Abernathy's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Mr. Harper's instructions were very specific. As I followed him through the funeral home to the small library used for private consultations, I felt the weight of the past decade pressing down on me. 10 years since Robert, my husband, had passed away. 10 years of slowly, incrementally, becoming more of a resource than a mother to my only child. It hadn't happened overnight. First, it was babysitting the twins a few times a week while Amanda and Travis went out. Then it was 3 times a week. Then it was every weekend. Then it was financial help when Travis's real estate development company hit a rough patch. Then it was more substantial financial support when the rough patch became a sinkhole. Each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time I told myself it was what mothers do. Each time, I ignored the voice in my head that whispered I was being taken advantage of. The Harper Library was a small, wood-paneled room with a round table in the center. Travis and Amanda were already seated when Mr. Abernathy and I entered. Travis looked impatient, drumming his fingers on the table. Amanda looked nervous, chewing on her lower lip, a habit from childhood she'd never quite broken. "Thank you all for joining me," Mr. Abernathy said as he took his seat and opened his portfolio. "Before I begin, I should note that Mr. Harper updated his will just 6 months ago. He was of sound mind and body at the time, and everything is legally binding." Travis leaned forward. "Let's just get on with it," Mr. Abernathy nodded. "Very well. I, Stanley Edward Harper, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." As he read through the standard legal preamble, I found myself thinking about the few times I'd spoken with Stanley Harper one-on-one. Once, when I'd driven him to a doctor's appointment because Travis was too busy. Once at the twins' 5th birthday party, when we'd found ourselves alone on the patio while everyone else was inside. And once, just 6 months ago, when he'd stopped by my house unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon. That last visit had been strange. He'd brought a box of expensive tea and asked if we could chat. We'd sat on my small porch drinking tea and talking about nothing in particular, the weather, books we'd read, the changing neighborhood. At one point, he'd asked me why I did so much for Amanda and Travis. "They're my family," I'd said simply. "Family doesn't treat family like staff," he'd replied. I remember being startled by his perception. Had he noticed what I'd tried so hard to ignore? Mr. Abernathy's voice pulled me back to the present. "And to my son, Travis Harper, I leave the sum of $50,000. Travis's head snapped up. "50,000? That's it?" Mr. Abernathy continued as if Travis hadn't spoken. "The Harper family home at 247 Elm Street, along with all its contents, I leave to my grandchildren, Oliver and Lily Harper, to be held in trust until they reach the age of 25. The trustee of this estate shall be Darlene Whitmore." The room went silent. Travis's face drained of color. Amanda gasped. "Me?" I whispered. Mr. Abernathy nodded. "Additionally, Mr. Harper has left a letter explaining his decisions. With your permission, I'll read it now." No one spoke. Taking our silence as assent, Mr. Abernathy removed an envelope from his portfolio, broke the seal, and began to read. "To those gathered here today, my life has been measured in acquisitions, properties bought and sold, deals made and broken, wealth accumulated. Only in my later years did I come to understand that true wealth is measured differently. It is measured in dignity, in kindness, in the quiet strength that comes from putting others before yourself, but never at the cost of your own self-respect. To my son, Travis, you have always wanted my approval but never understood what I truly valued. It wasn't business acumen or financial success. It was integrity. Something I see little of in how you've lived your life, particularly in how you've treated those who love you most. To Darlene Whitmore, a woman I've come to respect more than most men I've done business with. You have shown my grandchildren the love and stability they deserve. You have supported my son and his wife beyond what any parent should be expected to do. And you have done it all with a dignity that I find humbling. It is for this reason that I entrust you with my most valuable asset, the future of my grandchildren. The house on Elm Street is their inheritance, but your wisdom and kindness are the true gifts they will receive under your guidance. May this decision serve as a reminder to all that true worth is not measured in dollars, but in decency." As Mr. Abernathy folded the letter, the room remained silent. I could feel tears streaming down my face, not from joy or vindication, but from the simple relief of being seen. Truly seen, perhaps for the first time in years, Travis was the first to break the silence. "This is ridiculous. I'm contesting the will." Mr. Abernathy closed his portfolio. "That is your right, Mr. Harper. However, I should inform you that your father anticipated this reaction. He left extensive documentation of his reasoning, including financial records showing the extent of Mrs. Whitmore's support of your family over the years. Contesting the will would make all of this public record." Travis stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a mistake." He was old, confused. He was neither, Mr. Abernathy interrupted, his voice firm. He was, however, disappointed, and determined to correct what he saw as an injustice. As Travis stormed out of the room, Amanda remained seated, her eyes fixed on the table. I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away. "Did you know about this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Of course not," I replied. "Amanda, Did you talk to him? Influence him somehow?" The accusation stung worse than anything Travis could have said. "No, Amanda. I had no idea." She nodded, not meeting my eyes, then stood up and followed her husband. Mr. Abernathy and I sat in silence for a moment. Finally, he spoke. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitmore, Stanley thought very highly of you. He told me once that you reminded him of his late wife, strong, dignified, and far too generous for your own good." I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, placing a set of keys on the table between us, "you decide what kind of trustee you want to be. And perhaps what kind of mother and grandmother you need to be for yourself as much as for them." I picked up the keys, feeling their weight in my palm. They were more than just keys to a house. They were keys to a new chapter of my life, one where I would no longer be invisible. One where my worth would no longer be measured by what I could give, but by who I was. As I left the Harper Library that day, I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again allow myself to be treated as less than I was. Not by Travis. Not by Amanda. Not by anyone. Because Stanley Harper, a man I barely knew, had given me something far more valuable than property or money. He had given me back my dignity, and I intended to keep it. The drive home from the funeral home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road as I navigated familiar streets that somehow felt different now. My small Toyota, which had shuttled groceries and grandchildren and countless donations to Amanda's house over the years, now carried me and my complicated emotions. I pulled into my driveway. The concrete cracked in places. The mailbox slightly crooked from when a neighbor's teenager had backed into it last winter. My house was modest but mine, paid off years ago when Robert was still alive. We'd planned to travel after retirement, to see the Grand Canyon and the redwood forests. Instead, I'd spent my retirement helping my daughter and her husband maintain their lifestyle. As I turned off the engine, my phone buzzed. A text message from Amanda. "We need to talk about this. Not 'I love you,' not 'I'm sorry,' not even 'Are you okay?' Just, 'We need to talk about this,' as if Stanley's decision was a problem to be solved rather than a truth to be acknowledged. I didn't reply. For once, I would let someone else wait. Inside my house, I kicked off my shoes and hung my coat in the closet. The silence enveloped me. Not the lonely silence I'd grown accustomed to, but a peaceful quiet that felt like permission to breathe. I changed out of my funeral clothes into comfortable pajamas, even though it was barely 5 o'clock. Tonight was for me. I made a cup of tea and carried it to my small home office where I kept important documents in a filing cabinet. Opening the bottom drawer, I pulled out a folder labeled Loans to Amanda and Travis. Inside were copies of checks, bank transfers, and handwritten IOUs spanning the past 8 years, $12,000 for the twins' preschool tuition, $8,500 when Travis's car needed replacing, $20,000 when their mortgage was 3 months behind. Countless smaller amounts for groceries, utilities, clothing for the children. In total, nearly $65,000, most of my retirement savings. Money that had never been repaid and that I'd eventually stopped expecting to see again. Money that I'd given freely, out of love, but that had somehow transformed me from mom to financial resource in their eyes. The doorbell rang, interrupting my calculations. Through the peephole, I saw Travis standing on my porch, his face set in what I recognized as his business negotiation expression. I considered not answering, but decided that hiding would only delay the inevitable. When I opened the door, Travis didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, his expensive shoes tracking mud across my clean floor. "Darlene, we need to talk about this will situation," he said, removing his suit jacket and draping it over my couch as if he owned the place. "It's clearly a mistake." Dad was getting confused near the end. I stood by the door, still holding it open. "The will isn't a mistake, Travis. And Mr. Abernathy said your father was of sound mind." Travis waved his hand dismissively. "Abernathy would say that. He's being paid to execute the will as written. But you and I know this isn't what Dad really wanted. Do we? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like Stanley knew exactly what he was doing. Travis's face darkened. Look, I don't know what you said to him when you had your little chats, but this is my family's legacy we're talking about. That house has been in the Harper family for generations. And it still is, I reminded him. It belongs to your children now. With you as trustee, you who has no connection to the Harper name or history. I closed the front door but remained standing. I have a connection to your children, Travis. I've been more present in their lives than you have most days. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. That's unfair. I've been building a business, securing their future. While I secured their present, I finished for him. While I made sure they had warm meals and help with homework and someone to talk to about their day. Travis paced my small living room. So this is your revenge? Getting back at me and Amanda for asking for your help? I never saw it as asking when it became expecting, I said quietly. And this isn't revenge. This is Stanley's decision, not mine. A decision you clearly influenced. I shook my head. The only influence I had was being myself. Being reliable. Being present. Being honest. Travis stopped pacing and faced me. What do you want, Darlene? Money? Is that it? Name your price to step down as trustee. The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed. I don't want your money, Travis. I've given you enough of mine over the years. Then what? What do you want? What did I want? The question echoed in my mind. For so long, I'd suppressed my own wants and needs, focusing instead on what Amanda and Travis and the twins needed. I'd become so accustomed to giving that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself. I want respect, I said finally. I want to be seen as a person, not a resource. I want my daughter to remember that I'm her mother, not her employee. I want my grandchildren to know me as grandma, not the woman who solves problems and writes checks. Travis stared at me, clearly not expecting this answer. So you're not going to contest the will? You're going to take my father's house? It's not my house. It's Oliver and Lily's house, held in trust until they're old enough to appreciate it. And no, I'm not contesting anything. He reached for his jacket. Then I guess we'll see you in court. I'm sure a judge will find it strange that my father left his estate to his son's mother-in-law instead of his own son. As he moved toward the door, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Before you go down that road, Travis, you might want to look at this. I handed him the folder I'd been reviewing earlier. He flipped it open, his expression changing as he scanned the contents. What is this? Documentation of every dollar I've lent you and Amanda over the years. Money that was never repaid. Money that came from my retirement savings, my husband's life insurance, my home equity. His face paled. You've been keeping track? Planning this? I've been hoping I'd never need it, I corrected him. But as Mr. Abernathy mentioned, contesting the will would make everything public record, including this. Travis closed the folder, his hands shaking slightly. This feels like blackmail. It's accountability, I said. Something you've avoided for too long. He stood silent for a moment, then placed the folder on my coffee table. Without another word, he opened the front door and left. I locked the door behind him and returned to my cooling tea. My hands were steady, my breathing normal. I should have felt anxious or guilty, but instead I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The phone rang, Amanda this time, not a text. I let it go to voicemail. Tomorrow would be soon enough to continue this conversation. Tonight was still mine. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the invisible helper I'd allowed myself to become. She was stronger, her eyes clearer, her posture straighter. She looked like someone who had finally remembered her own worth. Stanley Harper had seen that woman before I did. And in his final act, he'd made sure everyone else would see her too. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was barely 7 o'clock and Amanda's name flashed on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail again, but something told me it was time to face whatever came next. Hello, Amanda, I answered, my voice still rough with sleep. Mom, she said, and I could tell she'd been crying. We need to talk. Can I come over? Without Travis? I sat up in bed, suddenly alert. Of course, do you want breakfast? A small laugh, watery with tears. That's so you, Mom. Always offering food. An hour later, Amanda's SUV pulled into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched her sit in the car for several minutes, head bowed, before finally coming to the door. When I opened it, I was struck by how young she looked, not the polished, put-together woman from the funeral, but the vulnerable daughter I remembered from years ago. "Come in," I said, opening my arms. To my surprise, she stepped into them, burying her face in my shoulder like she used to do as a child after a bad dream. We moved to the kitchen, where I'd prepared a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast. Amanda sat at the small table, pushing her food around her plate without eating. "Travis and I had a huge fight last night," she finally said. "About the will." "About you." "About everything." I waited, giving her space to continue. "He wants to contest it. He says Stanley was confused that you somehow manipulated him." She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "But that's not true, is it?" "No," I said simply. "I had no idea what was in Stanley's will until yesterday." She nodded, as if confirming something she already knew. "Travis showed me the folder. All the money that you've..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "It wasn't about keeping score, Amanda. I just needed to track it for tax purposes." She gave me a look that said she didn't quite believe me, and perhaps she was right not to. Part of me had always known those records might be needed someday. "I had no idea it was so much," she whispered. Somehow in my head it was just Mom helping out now and then. Not this. "It adds up," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell us to stop asking?" I considered her question carefully. "Because I wanted to be needed. Because saying no felt like failing as a mother. Because I was afraid if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being important to you." Amanda's eyes filled with fresh tears. "That's not true. You're my mom. I'll always need you. As a mother or as a solution to your problems?" She flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to chat, not because you needed money or babysitting or help with something?" Amanda fell silent, searching her memory and coming up empty. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken truths between us. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower started up, the mundane sound a strange counterpoint to the emotional conversation in my kitchen. "What happens now?" Amanda finally asked. "With the house, I mean. I'm going to visit it today," I said. "Mr. Abernathy gave me the keys and paperwork yesterday. As trustee, I need to assess its condition, make sure the utilities are maintained, that sort of thing. Can I come with you?" Her question surprised me. "I'd like to see it again. It's been years since we've been inside. Travis and Stanley had their falling out, and then..." "Well, you know," I nodded. "I'd like that." 2 hours later, we stood on the front steps of the Harper family home on Elm Street. It was a grand Victorian, built in the late 1800s and maintained with obvious care over the generations. The front garden was immaculate, the paint fresh, the brass fixtures polished to a shine. As I unlocked the front door, I felt a strange sense of trespassing, despite having the legal right to be there. The foyer was spacious, with a sweeping staircase leading to the second floor. Sunlight streamed through stained glass panels, casting colorful patterns across the hardwood floors. "It's exactly as I remember it," Amanda said softly, running her hand along a mahogany table. "Stanley never changed anything after his wife died. He said the house was perfect the way she left it." We moved through the room slowly, taking in the elegant furnishings, the family photographs, the shelves of books that spoke of a lifetime of reading. In Stanley's study, a large desk dominated the room, its surface neat and organized. "He used to let me sit here and draw while he worked," Amanda said, touching the desk reverently. "Before Travis and I were married. Stanley was different, then warmer, more patient." "What changed?" I asked. Amanda sighed. "Travis happened, I think. Their relationship was always difficult. Travis wanted Stanley's approval but resented needing it. Stanley wanted Travis to earn his respect, but couldn't hide his disappointment when Travis failed." We continued our tour upstairs, where 4 bedrooms branched off a central hallway. The master suite was austere but comfortable, with large windows overlooking the backyard garden. One bedroom had clearly been Travis's as a child, with model airplanes still hanging from the ceiling and sports trophies lining a shelf. Another room caught my attention. It had been converted into a children's playroom, with 2 small desks, bookshelves filled with children's literature, and toy bins organized by type. "He did this for Oliver and Lily," Amanda explained, her voice catching, even though they only visited a few times. "He said they needed their own space in his home." I thought of my own house, where the twins had gradually taken over my spare bedroom, leaving toys and books and change of clothes. I'd never minded having pieces of them in my space made the house feel less empty. As we completed our tour in the kitchen, a chef's dream of high-end appliances and stone countertops, Amanda turned to me. "What will you do with it?" "The house, I mean." "It's not mine to do anything with," I reminded her. "It belongs to Oliver and Lily. My job is to maintain it until they're old enough to decide what they want to do with it." "But you could live here," she suggested. "It's much nicer than your place, bigger, in a better neighborhood." I shook my head. "This isn't my home, Amanda. It's Stanley's home, and someday it will be your children's home. My place suits me just fine." She looked around the expansive kitchen, then back at me. "I don't understand. Most people would jump at the chance to live in a house like this." "I'm not most people," I said simply. "And living here would feel like taking something that isn't mine. Even after everything we've taken from you?" The question hung in the air between us. For the first time, Amanda seemed to truly understand the imbalance that had developed in our relationship. "That was different," I said finally. "I gave freely. No one made me." Amanda's eyes filled with tears again. "But we took advantage of that. We knew you'd never say no, so we just kept asking. That's no better than taking." I reached across the kitchen island and took her hand. "Then let's start fresh, both of us. No more taking without asking. No more giving without boundaries. Is that even possible?" she asked. "After everything that's happened?" "I hope so," I said. "Because despite everything, you're still my daughter, and I still love you." As we locked up the Harper house and drove back to my place, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness exactly. That would take time, but acknowledgement. A recognition of truths long ignored, and for now, that was enough. The next Saturday morning, the doorbell rang just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. I opened the door to find Oliver and Lily, my 9-year-old grandchildren, standing on the porch with their backpacks. "Grandma!" they chorused, wrapping their arms around my waist. Amanda stood behind them, looking tired but determined. "I thought maybe you could take them to see the house today." "Their house, I mean. If that's okay with you, this was unexpected." Since our visit to Stanley's home 5 days ago, Amanda and I had exchanged a few texts, but nothing substantive. Travis hadn't contacted me at all. "Of course," I said, ushering the twins inside. "Have you told them about the will?" Amanda nodded. "As much as they can understand at their age. That great-grandpa Stanley left them his house for when they grow up, and that you're in charge of taking care of it until then." Lily, always the more serious of the twins, looked up at me with her solemn brown eyes. "Mom said you're the trustee," I corrected gently. "That means I'm responsible for looking after great-grandpa's house and making sure it's well-maintained until you're old enough to live there yourselves, if you want to." Oliver's eyes widened. "We get to live there? Like, for real?" "When you're 25, I explained. "That's what great-grandpa Stanley wanted. Until then, the house belongs to both of you, but I'm in charge of all the decisions about it. Can we see it now?" Lily asked, already heading back toward the door. Amanda met my eyes over the twins' heads. I thought it might be good for them to start getting used to the idea, to see the house as something real in their future, not just a story. I grabbed my purse and keys. "It's a wonderful idea. We'll be back in a few hours?" Amanda shook her head. "Actually, I have a job interview this afternoon. That's partly why I brought them over. Could they stay with you tonight?" "I'll pick them up tomorrow." Another surprise. Amanda hadn't worked since the twins were born, always insisting that Travis's income was sufficient. This was new territory. "Of course they can stay," I said. "We'll have a grandma sleepover, right, kids?" The twins cheered, and Amanda mouthed a silent "thank you" before heading back to her car. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of the Harper house. The twins pressed their faces against the car windows, awed by the imposing Victorian. "It's like a castle," Oliver exclaimed. "It's so big," Lily whispered. "Did great-grandpa live here all by himself?" "For the last 20 years or so, yes," I explained as we walked up the front path. "After your great-grandmother passed away, before that your dad lived here too when he was growing up." "Dad lived here?" Oliver sounded shocked, as if he couldn't imagine his father as a child. I unlocked the front door and let the twins enter first, watching their expressions as they took in the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and stained glass windows. "This is all ours?" Lily asked, her voice hushed with awe. It belongs to both of you together, I confirmed. But remember, you won't be able to live here or make decisions about it until you're much older. Oliver was already racing up the stairs, his sneakers thumping on the hardwood. I want to see everything! We spent the next hour exploring the house together, the twins discovering new wonders in each room. They were particularly enchanted by the playroom Stanley had created for them, exclaiming over toys they'd never seen and books they'd never read. Great-grandpa made this for us? Lily asked, running her hand over a child-sized desk with her name carved into a small brass plate. He wanted you to have a special place here, I explained, remembering Amanda's words from our visit. Even though you didn't get to visit very often? Why didn't we? Oliver asked, looking up from a model train set he'd discovered in a cabinet. The question caught me off guard. How much should I tell them about the strained relationship between their father and grandfather? They were only 9, too young for the full complexity of adult grievances and resentments. Sometimes adults have disagreements, I said carefully. Your dad and great-grandpa Stanley didn't always see eye to eye on things. Like me and Oliver, Lily nodded sagely. We fight sometimes, but we still love each other. Exactly, I said, relieved at her simple but accurate comparison. But sometimes adult disagreements can last longer and be harder to resolve. As the twins continued exploring, pulling out toys and exclaiming over discoveries, I found myself wondering what Stanley had really intended with this bequest. Was it simply to provide financial security for his grandchildren? Or was there something more, a message perhaps about values and priorities? Grandma, look! Oliver called from the study, where he'd discovered a large world map on the wall with pins marking different locations. Great-grandpa went to all these places. I joined him, studying the dozens of pins scattered across the map: Europe, Asia, South America, Africa. He was quite the traveler, I observed. When we grow up, can Lily and I travel too? Oliver asked. Of course, I said. This house will always be here for you to come back to, but the world is big and full of amazing things to see. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding a photograph she'd found in one of the bedrooms. Grandma, is this great-grandpa and great-grandma? The photo showed a young couple on their wedding day, the woman in a simple white dress, the man beaming beside her. They stood in front of this very house, though the trees were smaller then, the paint a different color. Yes, I said, taking the frame carefully. That's them when they were first married, probably around 1965 or so. They look happy, Lily observed. I think they were, I agreed, studying the young Stanley's face, so different from the stern businessman I'd occasionally encountered. Your great-grandmother died before you were born, but great-grandpa Stanley always spoke very fondly of her. Did Dad look like great-grandpa? Oliver asked, peering at the photograph. I studied the image, a little around the eyes. But your dad takes after your grandmother's side more, I think. We spent the rest of the afternoon making the house feel less like a museum and more like a home the twins might someday inhabit. I let them rearrange the playroom to their liking. We opened windows to let fresh air circulate. In the kitchen, we baked cookies using ingredients I found in the well-stocked pantry. As evening approached, I realized we needed to return to my house for overnight things. But the twins were reluctant to leave. Can't we sleep here, Grandma? Lily pleaded. It's our house, right? Not tonight, I said gently. The house needs some preparing before it's ready for overnight guests. But we can come back again soon. On the drive back to my place, the twins chattered excitedly about their plans for their house. Oliver wanted to convert one room into a science lab, while Lily envisioned a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Slow down, I laughed. You have many years before you need to make those decisions. But you'll help us, right, Grandma? Lily asked. I'll be there every step of the way, I promised, feeling the weight of Stanley's trust in me. Not just to maintain a property, but to guide these children toward becoming the kind of adults who would appreciate such a legacy. That evening, after the twins were tucked into the twin beds in my spare room, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. How did it go? I typed back, wonderful. They love the house. How was your interview? Her response came quickly. Good, I think. It's just part-time at the library downtown. Nothing fancy, but it would be my own money. I smiled at the screen, recognizing the importance of what she was saying. Her own money, her own identity beyond wife and mother. Perhaps Stanley's will had sparked changes I hadn't anticipated. "I'm proud of you," I texted back. "The twins are asleep. We'll see you tomorrow." As I sat in the growing darkness, I felt a strange sense of gratitude toward Stanley Harper. Not just for the material legacy he'd left his grandchildren, but for the way his final act had disrupted the unhealthy patterns in our family. It was as if he'd seen what we could not or would not see for ourselves. In trying to preserve his legacy, he had given us all a chance to rewrite our stories. And for that, I would be forever grateful. 3 weeks after the funeral, Mr. Abernathy called to request a meeting at his office. "There are some additional matters regarding the Harper estate that require your attention," he explained. "And I believe it would be beneficial for Travis to be present as well." My stomach tightened at the thought of facing Travis again. Since our confrontation at my house, he'd maintained his distance, communicating with me only through terse texts about the twins' schedules when they visited. "Is this necessary?" I asked. "Can't we handle it separately?" "I'm afraid not, Mrs. Whitmore. Some of these matters concern both the trust and Mr. Harper's personal inheritance. It would be more efficient to address everything at once." I agreed reluctantly, and we set a time for the following afternoon. The law offices of Abernathy and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek building downtown. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my best blazer and slacks clothes that made me feel armored, professional, ready for whatever confrontation awaited. Mr. Abernathy greeted me warmly, ushering me into a conference room with a view of the city skyline. "Travis isn't here yet," he noted, checking his watch. "Can I offer you some coffee or tea while we wait?" "Tea would be lovely," I said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "Is everything all right with the estate? Has there been a problem?" "Not a problem, precisely," Mr. Abernathy said carefully. "More of a clarification that I believe will be important for both you and Travis to understand." Before he could elaborate, the door opened and Travis strode in, impeccably dressed in a business suit, his expression guarded. He nodded curtly in my direction before taking a seat as far from me as the conference table allowed. "Thank you both for coming," Mr. Abernathy began once we were settled. "As executor of Stanley's estate, I've been working to ensure all aspects of his will are properly implemented. In the course of that work, I've come across some information that impacts both of you." He opened a folder and removed several documents. "Mrs. Whitmore, as trustee of the property left to Oliver and Lily, you're aware that the house on Elm Street is to be maintained for their benefit until they reach the age of 25. I nodded. "What you may not be aware of is that Stanley left specific instructions about how that maintenance is to be funded." He slid a document across the table toward me. "He established a trust account with sufficient funds to cover property taxes, utilities, maintenance, and renovations for the next 16 years, until the twins come of age." I scanned the document, my eyes widening at the figures. Stanley had set aside over $300,000 for the home's upkeep. Additionally, Mr. Abernathy continued, he specified that the trustee you, Mrs. Whitmore, should receive an annual stipend of $30,000 for your services in managing the property and trust. I looked up, startled. "A stipend? But I'm family. I wouldn't expect to be paid for looking after my grandchildren's inheritance?" Mr. Abernathy smiled gently. "Stanley anticipated you might say that. He left a personal note addressing this specific point. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Stanley's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it and read, "Darlene, if you're reading this, then Abernathy has informed you about the trustee stipend. I imagine you're protesting, saying it's unnecessary, that family helps family without compensation. It's precisely that attitude that I'm trying to address. For too long, your generosity has been taken for granted. Your time, your energy, your resources, all given freely with no expectation of return. While that speaks to your character, it has allowed others to forget the value of what you provide. This stipend isn't just about money. It's about recognition. It's about establishing that your work has worth. It's about teaching my grandchildren, and yes, my son, that care and support are not infinite resources to be extracted without acknowledgement. Please accept this as my final request. Not for my sake, but for yours. And for the lessons it will teach those who have come to see your giving as an entitlement rather than the precious gift it truly is. With respect and gratitude." Stanley Harper. I folded the letter, aware of tears threatening to spill. Across the table, Travis shifted uncomfortably. "There's more," Mr. Abernathy said, turning to Travis. Regarding your inheritance, Travis? Travis leaned forward, suddenly attentive. The $50,000, yes. When can I expect that distribution? The monetary bequest will be distributed next week, Mr. Abernathy confirmed. However, there was an additional condition that I need to discuss with you both. He removed another document from his folder. Stanley left instructions that before Travis could receive his inheritance, he would need to provide documentation showing that all outstanding loans from Mrs. Whitmore have been repaid in full. The room went silent. Travis's face flushed deep red. That's ridiculous, he finally sputtered. Those weren't loans. They were gifts. Family helping family. I have here, Mr. Abernathy continued unperturbed, copies of Mrs. Whitmore's records showing loans totaling approximately $65,000 over the past 8 years. Stanley obtained these records with Mrs. Whitmore's permission during a conversation 6 months ago. I gasped softly. That Sunday afternoon visit. The tea on my porch. Stanley's pointed questions about why I did so much for Amanda and Travis. He'd had an agenda all along. This is manipulation, Travis said, his voice rising. He's trying to control me from beyond the grave. He's trying to make things right, I countered, finding my voice. He saw what I couldn't admit to myself, that our family dynamic had become unhealthy. That giving without limits isn't love. It's enabling. Travis stood abruptly, pacing the conference room. So what, I'm supposed to come up with $65,000 to repay loans that were never formally agreed upon? That's more than the inheritance itself. Actually, Mr. Abernathy interjected, Stanley anticipated this concern. He arranged for a separate fund of $65,000 to be set aside specifically for this purpose. If you agree to acknowledge these past loans and commit to a different relationship moving forward, the fund will be used to repay Mrs. Whitmore in full. Travis stopped pacing. So I'm not actually paying anything? Not in financial terms, Mr. Abernathy conceded. But Stanley was quite clear that you would need to acknowledge, in writing, the pattern of financial dependence and commit to changing it. Travis looked from Mr. Abernathy to me and back again. And if I refuse? Then the $50,000 inheritance remains in trust indefinitely, and the $65,000 repayment fund reverts to the twins' trust. I watched the calculations play across Travis's face, pride versus practicality, resentment versus potential gain. This feels like blackmail, he said finally, echoing his words from our confrontation at my house. It's accountability. I corrected him again. And maybe a chance to start fresh. Travis sank back into his chair, deflated. I need to discuss this with Amanda. Of course, Mr. Abernathy nodded. Take whatever time you need, but know that the offer stands as stated. There's no negotiation on the terms. As the meeting concluded, Travis left without looking at me. Mr. Abernathy walked me to the elevator. For what it's worth, he said quietly, Stanley thought very highly of you. In our last conversation before his passing, he told me he wished he'd had your strength of character. I smiled sadly. I never really knew him. Not well, anyway. He knew you, Mr. Abernathy replied. Through your actions, your choices, your quiet dignity, sometimes that's enough. As I drove home, Stanley's letter tucked safely in my purse, I pondered the strange relationship that had formed between us without my knowledge. He had seen what I couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge, that in trying to be the perfect mother, I had allowed myself to become something less than a complete person. His final act wasn't just about money or property. It was about restoration of balance, of dignity, of self-worth. And regardless of what Travis decided, I was determined to honor that intent, for Stanley's sake. For the twins' sake. And finally, for my own, fall arrived in Albany with a blaze of color, transforming the trees along Elm Street into a canopy of gold and crimson. I'd developed a routine of visiting the Harper house twice a week, checking on contractors, overseeing seasonal maintenance, and gradually making small updates that would preserve the home's character while ensuring it remained sound for years to come. The twins accompanied me whenever their schedules allowed, eagerly claiming their future inheritance one room at a time. Lily had started a garden journal, planning what she would plant in the spring. Oliver had mapped out the basement as his future invention workshop. Their enthusiasm was contagious, breathing new life into rooms that had stood silent for too long. On a crisp October afternoon, as I supervised the installation of a new water heater, my phone rang. It was Amanda. Mom, are you at the house? Can we talk? Her voice sounded different, steadier, more confident than I'd heard in years. For the past month, she'd been working part-time at the library, a job she seemed to genuinely enjoy. Our relationship was healing slowly, one careful conversation at a time. "I'm here," I confirmed. "The plumbers are just finishing up." "Should I meet you somewhere?" "I'll come to you," she said. "And Mom?" "Travis will be with me." I felt a flicker of apprehension. Since our meeting in Mr. Abernathy's office, Travis had maintained his distance. Amanda had mentioned they were seeing a marriage counselor, but beyond that, I knew little about what was happening in their relationship. "All right," I said. "I'll put on some coffee." An hour later, I heard car doors closing outside. Through the front window, I watched Amanda and Travis walk up the path. They weren't touching, but they moved in sync, without the tension that had characterized their body language for so long. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "Come in, the coffee's ready." We settled in the kitchen, the heart of the home, where difficult conversations somehow felt more manageable. Travis looked around, taking in the gleaming appliances and polished countertops. "The place looks good," he said, accepting the mug I offered. "Dad would be pleased." It was the first civil remark he'd made to me in months. I nodded, waiting. Amanda reached for Travis's hand, a gesture of support. "We've made a decision, Mom, about the inheritance conditions." Travis cleared his throat. "I'm going to sign the acknowledgement." "About the loans." I set my coffee down carefully. "I see." "It's not just about the money," Travis continued, his words coming faster now, as if he'd rehearsed them, but was still nervous. "These past few weeks, Amanda and I have been really talking about our marriage, our finances, our patterns." Amanda squeezed his hand. "We realized we've been stuck in a cycle that wasn't healthy for anyone. Not for us, not for the kids, and definitely not for you, Mom. Our counselor called it financial enmeshment," Travis added, "where money and emotions get so tangled up that it's hard to see where one ends and the other begins." I nodded, recognizing the term from my own reading these past months. "That sounds accurate." "I didn't want to admit how much we'd relied on you," Travis continued. "It felt like failing as a provider, as a husband. So instead of being grateful, I got resentful. And that wasn't fair to you." "No," I agreed quietly. "It wasn't." "We're making changes," Amanda said. "Real ones. The library job is just the start. We're downsizing to a smaller house that we can actually afford. Travis is restructuring his business to focus on what he does best instead of trying to impress his father, who isn't even here anymore," Travis added with a sad smile. "Old habits." I studied their faces, looking for signs of the old patterns, the performance of contrition that would inevitably be followed by a request. But their expressions were open, their body language relaxed. This felt different. "I'm glad to hear it," I said carefully. "And the acknowledgement?" Travis reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "It's all here. Signed and notarized as Mr. Abernathy required. A full accounting of every loan, with my commitment to establishing financial independence moving forward." I took the envelope but didn't open it. Some things needed to be accepted on faith. "Thank you." "There's something else," Amanda said, leaning forward. "We've been thinking about the twins and this house. It's so big for just the two of them, even when they're grown. What are you suggesting?" I asked, immediately protective of Oliver and Lily's inheritance. "Nothing that would take away from them," Travis assured me quickly. "Just an idea about how the house might serve the whole family better." Amanda smiled. "We thought maybe you might consider living here, Mom." I blinked in surprise. "Living here? But the house belongs to the twins. As trustee, you have the authority to use the property in ways that benefit them," Travis pointed out. "And having you here would definitely benefit the house. It needs someone living in it, not just checking on it twice a week. Plus," Amanda added, "we're moving to a smaller place. The twins will need somewhere to spread out when they're with us. If you were here, they could visit more often, get to know their inheritance, make it part of their lives now instead of some distant future event." I looked around the kitchen, trying to imagine myself in this space daily. It was beautiful, certainly, but it wasn't mine. It was Stanley's. It was the twins. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It feels like overstepping." Travis shook his head. "Dad would approve. He respected you, Darlene. He trusted you with his most valuable possession. I think he'd like knowing you were here, keeping his home alive." "Think about it," Amanda urged. No pressure, just consider it. As they prepared to leave, Travis hung back for a moment. There's one more thing. I found this in Dad's desk when I was collecting some old family photos. He handed me a small leather-bound notebook. I think he'd want you to have it. After they left, I sat on the porch swing with the notebook in my lap. Opening it carefully, I discovered it was Stanley's journal from the last year of his life. The entries were sporadic but thoughtful, offering glimpses into the mind of a man I'd barely known. One entry, dated 6 months before his death, caught my attention. Met with Darlene Whitmore today. Remarkable woman. Reminds me of Catherine in so many ways, the quiet dignity, the selfless giving. But there's a danger in that giving. Catherine learned to set boundaries. I'm not sure Darlene has. She's being taken advantage of and doesn't even see it. Or worse, sees it and accepts it as her role. I recognize the pattern all too well. Isn't that what I did to Catherine for years? Expected her to handle everything emotional while I built my empire? It took losing her to realize what I'd done. Too late for me to make amends to Catherine. But perhaps not too late to right another wrong. The house should go to the children, with Darlene as trustee. Travis will be furious, but perhaps it will force him to finally stand on his own feet. And Darlene, perhaps it will help her reclaim what she's given away for too long, her sense of self-worth. Must speak with Abernathy this week. I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. In his own way, Stanley had been trying to break a cycle, not just in his own family, but in mine. He'd seen parallels between his life with Catherine and what was happening with me, Amanda, and Travis. His final act hadn't been about punishment or control. It had been about redemption. As the sun set over Elm Street, casting long shadows across the porch, I made a decision. I would move into the Harper house not as an owner, but as a guardian. A keeper of stories. A bridge between past and future. It was time to honor Stanley's vision, not just of what this house could be, but of who I could be within it. Not invisible, not taken for granted, but valued, respected, seen. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home. Not in a building, but in my own skin. Spring came early to Albany the following year. The cherry trees that lined Elm Street erupted in pink blossoms, their petals drifting like snow across the freshly mowed lawn of the Harper house. My home now for nearly 6 months. The decision to move in had been easier than I expected. My small house had sold quickly, providing a comfortable addition to my retirement savings. The twins had helped me choose which of my belongings to bring, insisting that their great-grandfather's home needed some grandma things to make it perfect. On this particular Saturday morning, I sat at the kitchen island, finalizing plans for Oliver and Lily's 10th birthday party. The house would be full tomorrow, Amanda and Travis. Of course, but also schoolmates, neighbors, and even Mr. Abernathy, who had become something of a friend over the past year. The doorbell rang, and I found Amanda on the porch, holding a large box wrapped in birthday paper. "You're early," I said, ushering her in. "The twins aren't coming until this afternoon." "I know," she smiled, setting the box on a hallway table. "I wanted to talk to you first. Alone." We moved to the sunroom at the back of the house, my favorite space with its wall of windows overlooking the garden. Stanley's wife, Catherine, had been an avid gardener, and I'd spent the winter studying her old notebooks, planning to restore her vision when the ground thawed. "Everything looks wonderful. Mom," Amanda said, taking in the freshly painted walls, the comfortable mix of Harper antiques and my more casual furnishings. "You've really brought this place back to life." "It's brought me back to life too, in a way," I admitted. "Having a purpose, a responsibility like this, it's been good for me." Amanda nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You seem happier, stronger." "I am," I agreed. "And you? How are things at the new house?" After downsizing to a modest 3-bedroom closer to downtown, Amanda and Travis had found their financial footing for the first time in their marriage. Amanda's part-time job had become full-time with benefits. Travis had refocused his business on property management rather than development, providing a steady income without the high risks that had plagued his earlier ventures. "We're doing well," Amanda said. "Really well, actually. The smaller house is so much easier to maintain. Our expenses are half what they were. And Travis seems lighter somehow. Like he's finally stopped trying to be someone he's not." "And the two of you?" I asked gently. Amanda smiled. "Better than we've been in years." The counseling helped. So did facing our financial reality instead of pretending everything was fine. We actually talk now about money, about parenting, about the future. I'm glad, I said, meaning it deeply. Despite everything, I'd never stopped hoping for my daughter's happiness. Amanda reached for my hand. Mom, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago. I waited, giving her space to find the words. I'm sorry, she said simply. For taking you for granted. For accepting your help without acknowledgement. For treating your love like an unlimited resource that would always be there, no matter how much we demanded. Amanda, no, please let me finish, she insisted. When Dad died, I leaned on you. That was natural, I think. But then I kept leaning, year after year, until you were carrying all of us, me, Travis, the twins. And I never stopped to ask if it was too much, or to thank you properly, or even to see you as a person with your own needs and desires. Her eyes filled with tears. Stanley saw it. He barely knew you, and he saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see. That makes me ashamed. But it also makes me grateful that someone was looking out for you when I wasn't. I squeezed her hand. We all have blind spots when it comes to family. The patterns we establish become invisible to us over time. But that's no excuse, Amanda insisted. You deserved better from me, and I promise, from now on, you'll get it. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the budding trees in the garden. So much had changed in a year, not just our circumstances, but ourselves. The journey hadn't been easy, but the destination felt right. I have something for you, Amanda said finally, standing up. It's not exactly a gift, more of a return. She retrieved the wrapped box from the hallway and placed it in front of me. Open it. Inside, I found stacks of neatly organized folders, each labeled with dates and amounts. With a start, I realized they were the loan records I'd kept all those years, the documentation of every dollar I'd given Amanda and Travis. But something was different. Attached to each folder was a check dated and signed. What is this? I asked, though I already knew. Repayment, Amanda said simply. Not just of the money, though, that's part of it. But of the respect you always deserved. I leafed through the folders, stunned. But how? This is $65,000, Amanda finished for me. Plus interest. We didn't use the fund Stanley set up. That didn't feel right somehow. This is from us, from our savings, from extra jobs, from careful budgeting over the past year. Amanda, I never expected... I know you didn't, she interrupted gently. That's the point. You never asked for anything in return. But that doesn't mean you didn't deserve it. I closed the box, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Amanda assured me. Just accept it. Like you taught me to accept help when I need it, and to give help when I can, but always with recognition of what it costs, and gratitude for what it means. Later that afternoon, the twins arrived in a whirlwind of energy, eager to help prepare for their birthday celebration. As we worked together in the kitchen mixing cake batter, stringing decorations, laughing over memories, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This house, which had once represented Stanley Harper's legacy, had become something more, a gathering place for healing, for growth, for new beginnings. Not just for his family, but for mine, for us. That evening, after the twins had gone home with Amanda, I sat on the porch swing with Stanley's journal in my lap. I'd taken to reading an entry each night, getting to know the man whose final act had changed all our lives. The last entry, written just days before his death, read, "Finalize the will today." Abernathy thinks I'm being harsh with Travis, but sometimes kindness looks like letting someone face consequences. My son has spent his life seeking my approval while rejecting my values. Perhaps in my absence, he'll finally discover his own worth not as my heir, but as himself. As for Darlene, I hope she understands my intent. This isn't charity or pity. It's recognition. It's seeing someone who has spent too long being invisible. It's acknowledging that quiet dignity and selfless giving are not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths to be honored. Catherine always said that true wealth wasn't in what you accumulated, but in what you gave away. By that measure, Darlene Whitmore may be the richest woman I've ever known. I can think of no better guardian for my grandchildren's inheritance, both the material house on Elm Street and the values I hope it represents. If I have any regret, it's that I didn't find the courage to live by those values myself until it was almost too late. But perhaps it's not too late for Travis, or for Amanda, or for Oliver and Lily. In the end, we leave behind more than our possessions. We leave our stories, our examples, our truth spoken or unspoken. I hope mine will finally be clear when I'm gone. That dignity matters. That kindness matters. That being seen and valued for who you are, not what you provide, matters most of all. I closed the journal, wiping away tears. Outside, the cherry blossoms continued their gentle descent, covering the lawn in a carpet of pink. In the morning, I would sweep the porch and sidewalk clear. But tonight, I would let them fall where they may, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from letting go. As I headed inside, I paused in the foyer, taking in the home that had become mine in ways I never expected. Not through ownership, but through stewardship. Not through entitlement, but through earned trust. In the quiet of the evening, I whispered words that had become a kind of mantra over the past year. For years, I thought love meant always saying yes. But sometimes love is saying no so that others learn to stand and you remember how to breathe. Stanley Harper had given me back my breath. And in doing so, he had given all of us a chance to inhale deeply and begin again. Not as takers and givers. Not as users and used. But as family. Imperfect, learning, growing together full circle.